Hopefully you caught my last channel update video on why I've been gone for so long. I won't bore you with all that because you should have watched last video. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go ahead and do the video that I promised a really long time ago, and now I'm actually finally putting it out. I took the books, the hardcover books, a small version and a big version from the dollar store, and I have turned them into journals. So that is what we're going to go over today. Let's jump right into it. The first step is to cut out the center of the journal. So you're going to take it and use an X-Acto blade to cut. And you want to cut right on the edge of the page on the inside. Once you have the pages cut out, you can go ahead and recycle them or pass them along to someone else who might have use for them. I pass them along to a friend who does collage work. The next step is to use the cover to measure out how big you want your pages to be. You're going to cut them out as if they were not folded in half yet. So they're going to fit both sides of the book, and then we're going to fold them in half. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a stack of 5 medium-sized cardstock paper, and I'm cutting that down to fit on the inside of the cover. I'm measuring it out so that it's going to be slightly smaller than the cover size. Once I have it cut down, I fold it in half and I double check that it's going to fit exactly the way I want it to. And for this journal in particular, and especially with the paper that I'm using, because it's a square book and I'm using regular sized 8.5 by 11 cardstock paper, it's not going to fit squarely. But I was okay with having a little bit of an overhang on the inside of my book. So now I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half. I am using a ruler to go ahead and score the pages so that the fold is nice and sharp. You really want this crease to be really, really sharp and clean because it's going to make for a tighter bind when you are stitching the pages together. And here's where you're going to want to take a look at the edge of your pages, because when you fold 5 heavyweight pieces of paper, you're going to notice that there's going to be uneven edges on the edges that are going to stick out of the journal. So I like the uneven edges. I think it adds character and texture and personality. But if you don't, then you're going to want to trim those down so that they're all even. So the page that is on the inside of the fold is going to be actually a little bit shorter than the pages that are on the outside of the fold. Once you have the pages at the exact size that you would like, the next step is to go ahead and measure out where your holes are going to be. So what we're going to do is stitch these pages together. And something to keep in mind, that I'll probably repeat myself a couple of times on this, the more you want the pages to be tight and perfect and aligned and together, and the stronger you want your hold to be, the more holes you're going to need to make. I really like loose, rough journals that have a little bit of character, so I'm only going to make 4 holes. This makes it very easy for me to demonstrate the stitching, but for you personally, you're going to need to make a decision on how strong you want the bind to be on your journal. And if you're going to want it to be stronger, you need to make more holes closer together. For this particular project, I'm also using thumbtack to poke my holes. A thumbtack is actually very large. It's going to give me a really nice large hole to weave this particular thread that I'm using through. When you poke your holes, the one thing you want to keep in mind is that you do want them to be even number of holes, because you want the ends of the thread to be on the outside. You want both of them to be where the bind is going to be glued down. So you want the insides of your fold to be nice and clean and stitched and have no knots or holes. The thread is the only material that you probably will not be able to find at your dollar store, but they are available at fabric stores as well as craft stores, or available online. It is a wax thread. It's very thick, but it's very smooth because it's got the wax on it. So it makes it a lot easier for first-time crafters or for kids to be able to weave the pages together. You just need a slightly bigger hole, but thankfully a thumbtack provides the perfect size for that hole. If you're looking to make a nicer, cleaner, more professional looking journal, you're going to want to use a different thread than what I'm using here. And ideally, you're going to want to find something that has a strong bind, but that isn't too thick. You could find other thread at the dollar store. The only concern I would have is to double check the durability. Go ahead and yank on both ends and see if it frays or pulls apart, because the last thing you want to do is stitch all your pages together and then while you're using the journal, the thread breaks. If you're going to use thread from the dollar store, another option you could have is to double thread it. So instead of threading once through, thread it through twice through the same holes, and this will allow you to have a stronger bond in case one of the threads breaks. This wax thread, as I showed, does come in white, but for this project I'm using black so that it shows up better on camera so you can see exactly how I'm weaving it through. So I'm going to start from the outside at the very top, and then I'm going to weave down through the pages. Since I found this very simple 4-hole bond to be a little too flimsy for my liking, I'm going to go ahead and double weave from the back side. So I am taking the two ends that were on the outside and I'm weaving them through from the back to the front and then from the front to the back. This means that I have multiple threads going through the same hole, so I do have to widen the holes just slightly with my thumbtack again. This double threading creates a tighter bond with less holes. Depending on how close your holes are together, you may not need to do this step, but if you would like to do less holes, this is a nice way to keep the project simple with less holes, but produce a tighter bind on the pages. Then we're going to finish it off with a nice knot. And the tighter you can get this knot, the better. I have a little bit of loose on my knot, which is not always the best, but again, I like journals with character, and this is just to show you the process. After After finishing your pages, it's time to focus on the cover. We're going to do a wrap on the cover. I am using a recycled toned paper that I got from, I believe, from Michael's a very long time ago. This is actually a scrap piece. I use this backing. Actually, you know what? I did get it from Hobby Lobby. I used it as backing for my framed works, and this is just a tiny scrap piece that I threw into my scrap box. So I had it something lying around. You can basically wrap your book in absolutely anything you want, but I do suggest you try to find something with a little bit more durability than standard computer paper, whether that is a cardstock or a recycled paper like this, or you could go to a paper store and get a handmade paper. Handmade papers make really nice journal covers because they're very decorative and they're very easy to use because they still have some flexibility to them. Another thing I would not suggest is poster board, because poster board is so thick that it's going to make it harder to fold it over the edges of the cover, as you'll see in just a minute. It's not impossible. If you're familiar with scoring your edges, you may be able to make it really cleanly, make it nice and clean and fold it over nicely, but that's a little bit more challenging than what I'm about to show you, so I'll leave that up to you to make that decision, but I personally stick away from poster board because I'm not that good at scoring. Typically, I would use a high-tack glue like this one. But for this project, I'm using materials that I got at the dollar store, which includes this bottle of Mod Podge. The only problem with using Mod Podge is that it is very quick to dry, especially when you're applying it in the way we're going to apply it. So what that means is you have to be very confident in laying down your book cover very quickly, or the tack really won't be there to adhere to the pages. Something you can do is take it one step at a time if laying down the entire cover at one time is intimidating to you. The way you do that is glue the center binding first and then slowly work your way towards the wraparound. Hopefully that makes sense. So you would start from the outside binder, put glue there, make sure it glues down in the center, then add the glue to the cover, then add the glue on the inside of the cover. It's a little bit more time consuming, but that's one way that you could make it work with just Dollar Tree supplies. So I'm just brushing it on to the page and the cover and then placing them together and doing the wrap, and then placing an additional small thin layer of glue to secure the wrap. The key here is to use enough glue that the paper adheres, but don't use too much glue because then it'll saturate the paper and the paper can tear and rip, especially if you're using a thinner paper, which is why I don't recommend computer paper, because it's thin and it rips and it buckles very easily. And you'll see on this journal with the recycled paper that I used, I do end up having a little bit of buckling on one of the cover sides of the covers. So it does happen. And it's much less likely to happen if you're using a handcrafted paper that has a little bit more weight to it than what I'm using here. Wrapping the edges can be very tricky, so I recommend cutting the corners at a diagonal to give yourself some triangles that you can easily fold over. There are a couple different ways to do this. You can cut them so that when you wrap them over the edge, they actually line up perfectly and you don't need to do any overlap. But I am way too lazy for that, so I just cut them so that I can easily tuck them in and wrap them. It does require a little extra glue, but for me, that little extra glue is totally worth the time saved of having to perfectly measure out the cut and the angles to get them to line up perfectly without overlapping. Another thing you want to make sure of, and of course I should have mentioned this before I glued down my cover, is that you want to make sure that you have enough of an overlap that when you glue down your pages, you will be covering these edges, these glued edges. So it'll look very seamless. If you make your wrap too short and your pages are shorter than the size of your cover, then you will have a gap between the overlap and the pages, and it just looks kind of messy. Now once your cover is finished drying, we're going to now take the pages that you created and put them into the journal. Now this step is actually very simple, especially if you're only using one batch of pages. All you have to do is just put glue on the outer edges of your pages and then glue them down over the wrap that we did, as you see here. It's a little challenging to sometimes get it to be perfectly centered. And the better you are at measuring out how many pages you need to fill that center binder, the more accurate your pages are going to be as far as being balanced and centered. I probably should have made another batch of pages for this journal, but I wanted to keep it very simple and very small and easy for you to do for yourself or with kids. Up next, we're going to tackle the big journal, and that's where I'll show you how you can combine multiple pages. So you can also do multiple page packets, like I'm going to show you now, with your smaller journal as well, if you would like to have it be thicker and more centered. I decorated the smaller journal with a little bit of washi tape that I got from my dollar store and some stamps that I had lying around. Very simple, very easy to use, and now it's all done. So let's jump into the bigger book. This is the same exact process, except I'm adding more pages in. So just like with the first one, I'm going to get my pages ready 5 at a time. And for this project, I am using computer paper instead of index card paper to show you that you can use computer paper on the inside of your journals. I'm putting them together in groups of 5, and then I'm going to have 4 batches of 5 total when I finish. So I create each batch just like I did with the first journal. The holes are going to be a little bit different because these pages are obviously taller than the square format that I was previously working on. But I'm weaving them back through exactly the same. The only change is I'm leaving a little bit more of a loop on the outside, and you'll see why I'm doing that in just a minute. Once all the page packets are done, we are now going to take that small loop that we left out and take a small piece of thread and tie all of the page packets together using those loops that line up. The key is to make sure that all of your holes on your page packets line up as close as possible. The more accurate you can be, the better your pages are going to come out. Now we're going to add an additional layer to bind them together. I pulled these little tiny end tabs off of the original binding of the big journal that I had because they match the outside cover of this journal. So I'm going to glue those down first. Obviously, they're not necessary. They're more decorative, but I liked them, so I kept them. Now I'm going to take a sheet of index paper, cardstock paper, that's a little bit heavier, and I'm going to glue that together like a binding on the outside. So I've cut it to be about an inch, inch and a half, wrap around to either side, and to also glue onto the binder, the outside of the binder. This is an extra layer of protection that will hold the pages together tightly. Once you have finished putting that on, I would suggest at the bare minimum letting it dry. If you want the bind to be even tighter and to glue together very tightly, I would also suggest putting it underneath a very heavy book or a heavy object that's going to flatten the pages together and really push that glue together on the inside. I did not do that, again, because I don't need these journals to be perfect, but the closer you can get those pages to be as the glue is drying, the tighter and better the binder will be for your book. Once you're finished with your pages, just like the first journal, you can go ahead and create a wrap for your book and glue the pages in exactly the same way. For this particular book, I really liked the outer cover, so I am not going to wrap it. I'm going to leave it exactly how it is and just glue the pages on the inside of the hardcover. And that's it. You now have a small journal and a large journal for your enjoyment, all created with using dollar store supplies. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more craft-related projects, especially with dollar store materials, please do let me know in the comment box below. I do very much listen to your suggestions. I don't always do all of them, but when you guys give me suggestions, I really do take them to heart and I try to make them happen. I really, 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 really appreciate it when you engage with my content, when you let me know how you feel. Especially beyond hitting just the dislike button. I know some videos have a lot of dislikes and I don't even know why, because people don't leave comments. So if you don't like this video, please do let me know. I totally accept constructive criticism. I appreciate both positive and negative content. Comments. Don't be mean, but constructive criticism is always welcome because I want to improve. I want to get better. I know I have a lot to improve on. Next week, I'm going to be deep diving into gunpowder art again. I know I've shared a little bit of gunpowder art on my Instagram, and I think I have my gunpowder owl video. I'm going to be talking about the difference between using a gunpowder and a black powder. It has a very different technique and final product, final results. So that's going to be a really exciting video with lots of fire and poofy smoke. So be sure to tune in next week and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because you will not know when that video is posted unless you're subscribed. You can hit that little notification bell that I'm sure you're sick of other YouTubers talking about, but the notification bell allows you to actually receive a notification when I post a video. So it is important that you not only subscribe and but also hit that bell. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, remember to create love and travel on. Bye!